Hello again. Our topic today is situation ethics, the last of these classic ethical theories we're going to look at. We have seen already some forms of act utilitarianism and act deontology. If you'll recall, act utilitarianism believes that every situation is different, so no rules apply. Each situation must be evaluated on its own terms to bring about the greatest amount of happiness and the least amount of pain for the greatest number of people. Act deontology is an even more slippery idea, I think, or a very slippery concept, and then it believes that every situation, every human situation we find ourselves in is different, and as such, no rules work. Instead, one must assess almost intuitively what duty is being called for each moment of life in each new situation. So today we turn to an ethical theory that's a little bit like those two, situation ethics. But situation ethics is different in that it isn't even tied finally to some utilitarian end, like the greatest amount of happiness, least amount of pain for the greatest amount of people, or even to doing one's duty. Situation ethics recognizes that in some situations, a teleological system that has a goal or consequence in mind works, but not in all. Situation ethics also recognizes in some situations fulfilling one's duty works, but in other situations that may not be the best alternative in thinking about how to handle a situation. So really the origin of situation ethics is all the other ethical theories we've looked at and their shortcomings. All the other ethical theories have shortcomings, situations in which they just don't apply and won't work. So really the rule behind situation ethics is to every rule there's an exception. To every rule there's an exception. You've probably all said that and heard it many times. And in fact, if we're honest, there are many exceptions to every rule. And the reason for that is because no two situations are alike. Situation ethics really becomes popular in the mid-1960s. It begins earlier than that, but that's when people really start writing about it and it becomes a serious ethical theory in the world of morality. But it has its roots in a slightly older philosophical system known as existentialism. And I'm going to try to briefly, all too briefly, explain to you a little bit about what existentialism is, because really this theory can't be divorced from existentialism. In fact, it is the way existentialism recommends a human being act and envision life. Now, we are said now to be living, at least in some schools of thought, in a postmodern world. And I'm not even going to try to get into what all that means, except that people are saying we've passed modernity. So I want to step back for a minute and talk about what the modern world was. The modern world was based on the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment was really a world of scientific reason. It's born in the Renaissance and comes into its fruition after that. The Enlightenment is the birth of our modern scientific world in which we use the scientific method. The birth of the modern world in which we do history in the ways we do now. And one of the effects of the Enlightenment was that it gave great confidence to us human beings in our own human abilities, and especially the human mind. Coming out of the Enlightenment, we came to believe that if we human beings put our minds to it, we can do almost anything, and we can overcome almost any problem. One of the results of the Enlightenment is our American society. Our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution are built very strongly on ideas that were at the very heart of the Enlightenment, that all of us, if we use our minds correctly, are capable of governing and running our own lives independently without need from outside interference. Again, there's confidence there in the ability of the human being to manage its own affairs, and confidence in the ability of our minds to control us and what we do. The world was moving along, and great human progress and huge progress was made in terms of technology and stuff as a part of the Enlightenment, and it's really brought us into our modern world. But there were a few things that shook up this great confidence in the human being. Probably the biggest of all is World War I. Prior to World War I, all kinds of political work had been done, very rational, well thought out, well-reasoned political work to form all sorts of alliances, especially in Europe, to prevent war from ever really breaking out again. And people ever actually thought that that could happen, that with all the right alliances and stuff being laid in place, we could stop war from happening in the future. And suddenly a prince was killed in Sarajevo, and suddenly, because of all these alliances that had been made, all of Europe was plunged into a great war, the biggest war the world had ever seen to this point. And with our advanced technology, we were able to kill each other in numbers that world history had never seen before. And eventually even our own nation, the United States, ended up involved in this war. All those things that were supposed to keep war from ever happening again failed. And along about the same time, some other great failures in human technology brought to the fore that maybe we human beings aren't quite as good or capable of doing all the great things as we were. A couple great examples of this would be the Hindenburg, the great blimp, hydrogen-filled blimp that flew from Germany to the United States and exploded just upon reaching its mooring in New York. Not long after that, the largest, most luxurious passenger ship ever built in history, a ship that was supposed to be unsinkable, sank on its very first voyage by hitting an iceberg, the Titanic. You all know the story and probably have seen the recent movie that was so popular based on that as well. Those kind of things really started to shake the human being in thinking about what we human beings are really capable of. And a lot of the confidence we had in all that we could do was eroded by those things. And then we found ourselves plunged into another great world war, the Second World War. Out of all of that comes this new way of thinking called existentialism. And existentialism does not have nearly as much confidence in the human being as the Enlightenment did. And existentialism does carry some Enlightenment thought with it very strongly, though, particularly the emphasis placed on the individual. But in existentialism, there's a sense in which I exist in opposition to the rest of the world around me. And that I exist maybe even in the midst of a hostile world. And every moment in this hostile world that surrounds me is a new, unique moment, a moment that has never existed before. And you can't really look to the past to find answers to deal with the present, because the present is different than anything that ever happened before. And again, some of the reason for that is that, for instance, in World War I, they fought that war based on past wars, but the new technology made it different. And what things that worked in the past didn't work anymore. And so that idea is sort of applied to all of life in existentialism. You can't look to any particular theory, rules, consequences, or goals. Every moment has to be evaluated on its own for what it is, without any appeals to the past or anything that has happened before. Because the present moment is new and different. It has to be evaluated on its own and acted upon on its own. That's the idea behind existentialism and situation ethics. For situation ethics, there is no one rule that applies. There's no one moral theory that applies. Every moment has to be evaluated on its own, and you, as the moral agent, have to determine in this situation, which the world has never seen before, what is the best thing to do. Now, here's some weaknesses with this way of thinking, or some problems with it. First of all, if there are no rules, and if we can't appeal to the past, how do we even begin to evaluate our present human situation? The way we human beings make sense out of anything is to look back at things we've already experienced and to use things we already know. Without something from the past to compare the present to, we have nothing to make sense out of the present with. Our minds work, the human mind works by analogy. We take things we know and compare it to new situations. So we work through correlation. And if we can't appeal to any rules, any theories, any history from the past, we have nothing to correlate the present moment to try to make sense out of it. And it seems to me situation ethics might ask us to live by the seat of our pants in ways that really aren't possible for the human being. However, the value of situation ethics is it's right. Other ethical theories don't apply and work in every situation. They just don't. And so it's the honest part about this theory that we have to keep in mind. So I guess to wrap up these classic ethical theories, what I want you to see from all of them, and this probably relates to situation ethics the best, is that they may all be helpful at times. They may all work at times, but they all have times when they don't, and all of these theories have some shortcomings and flaws. Thank you.